The Liberty Weekly podcast is brought to you by Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom. Sick of losing arguments with your statist friends? Fear no more. Now you can vanquish your intellectual foes with courses taught by top libertarian professors. Tool your intellectual arsenal and enroll today by navigating to www.libertyweekly.net/Liberty Classroom or by following the link in the show notes page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Liberty Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McFarlane, and tonight I am joined by special friends Daniel and Robert from the Actual Anarchy Podcast. It is like the other wing of the Liberty Weekly Podcast. We do a lot of behind-the-scenes work together, so I'm thrilled to be hanging out with them tonight. We've been talking for about, an hour already, having some good times, some laughs. And this is a Thoughtcrime Thursdays edition of the Liberty Weekly Podcast because we're technically still recording on Thursday, and I think I want to release this episode tonight or tomorrow. Either way, here we are. And we're going to be discussing Hollywood and film because the Actual Anarchy Podcast is, well, I'll let you guys explain what that is. Daniel, what is the Actual Anarchy Podcast?
Well, it's just a couple of guys up to no good, started making trouble in the neighborhood. We were always talking about movies and making quotes and talking about anarchy and Austrian economics and whatnot, so we decided to start recording it. So now we do a show where we dissect movies. We do ANCAP movie reviews, essentially. It's sort of in the vein of Murray Rothbard. He was famous for writing reviews of movies under the pen name Mr. First Nighter. And so we've just been doing that for a year and a half. It used to be the Read Rothbard podcast. Now it's the Actual Anarchy Podcast. We're going to record episode 46 tonight of the new name. It's going to be Man of Steel. So look out for that, everyone who's a listener to Liberty Weekly. And Robert, you want to add any color to that intro?
Yeah, your man Pat McFarlane might be joining us on the recording, so we'll see. It should be a good one. Man of Steel is multi-textured, full of layers and terribleness and a little bit of goodness, so it'll be fun.
I mean, I've seen a whole 17 minutes of it so far, as we were talking about before. But, yeah, no, I'll probably join. You got
nothing else to do. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I'm really excited to do this. I've been wanting to actually get together and record with you guys for a little bit now, since, Daniel and I talk all the time. But, yeah, so this is the general idea that I had, and we kind of mentioned this before we went live, and basically that I don't think there's anything profound coming out of Hollywood anymore. There's very few films that actually make me stop and think differently about a certain topic. What do you guys think about that just right off the bat?
Well, I know that there is a definite movement in Hollywood to maximize your return on your investment because, making a movie is a risky business. And it takes a risky guy to say, I'm going to give you, $100 million, go do a thing, and hopefully we don't lose our shirts on it. So I know with the Transformers movies, which are unmitigated piles of garbage, in my opinion, which is unfortunate because, it's a beloved childhood. I mean, you're too young, but from my childhood, I grew up playing with Transformers and just loved them and that sort of thing. You can't go back. If you try to go back and watching the old cartoons, they're just horrific. But the idea is to make the story be almost like a background element. It's not super important, so that worldwide audiences can enjoy it and not really have to follow any kind of intricate kind of plot nuance or surprises or anything like that. Mostly focus on action and spectacle and less on good dialogue, because who cares? Because it's not going to translate well to other audiences anyway. So you're not going to have region-specific jokes, like a joke that would play really well on the west coast of the United States is going to get flat receptance in Beijing, so who cares? Just shit out this, plot script or make it up on the spot even better. Let's just get going. It's not super important. Let's just spend all the money on the back end and the CGI, and it'll play to a very broad audience, and they make billions of dollars. Every movie makes $1 billion, and they don't make a ton of money in the United States. I mean, they still do, a couple $100 million, but they make a ton of the money overseas. So I know that's a big push, a big trend in Hollywood to broaden the base, with the whole entire globalization. I mean, every Marvel movie is now making like $1 billion, and I know you've got some criticisms of that, so I'd really like to hear about that. I'm sure Daniel's got maybe an idea or two, too.
Yeah, why don't you chime in first, Daniel?
Yeah, I was going to go after the SJW turn that it appears has become so important in polite society, and how culture is sort of driven that, and now it has to react to it. So you sort of run into this place where a lot of movies that were made 30, 40 years ago couldn't be made today. Think of any Mel Brooks movie, or think about Police Academy, think about, anything that you kind of grew up on and had that off-color humor, that kind of risque stuff going on. Try to pull that off today, and you'll get, punched in the face. They'll try to punch the Nazi out of you. They'll boycott you, ban you, say it's hate speech, whatever. And I think that leads into other mediums, like comic books. We've talked about this before with the Marvel Universe, where you have all the superheroes that we grew up with are turning into women somehow. Some magical way they become transmorgified, like the original character dies and the mantle gets picked up by a female character. And you even see it in Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was one of the greatest libertarian movies of all time. They do a reboot, and it's all women. And my initial thoughts on it, without ever seeing it, was this is going to be a crap fest. And it turns out it's actually better than that, as we discussed in our episode, I believe it was 17, with Louis Lieberman and Julie Wilder. But, it just goes on and on. You've got the Wonder Woman movie that I just watched the other night with my wife, which I only bought because libertarians that I like and respect said, oh, that was actually a good movie. Wrong. Wrong. It's a terrible movie. And it just panders to the girl power, SJW, we got to have the patriarchy, destroyed. Capitalism is evil, even though they're doing capitalism, right? I mean, it's just, I'm just sort of ranting aimlessly here.
No, let me jump in and piggyback off what you're saying, Daniel, because what you're saying is absolutely correct. But also, you have this push for greater inclusiveness and diversity, and that just creates a very bland experience. You've got this United Colors of Benetton type ad where movies are criticized for their whitewashing when you've just got a director following his vision of what he wants to do, and maybe, it happens to not have any Asian people, can you imagine, in this movie, or any black people in this movie. Oh my God, the horror. These people are racist, clearly. And so, you have this, the studio executive will say, we need some white people in this movie, or we need more brown people, or we need more Asians, or we need more whatever. And you're just like, the script, does anyone care about the story, what this movie's actually about, or are we just throwing being inclusive for inclusiveness' sake? And it just leads to this very bland product where you don't really have this bite of this director, of this really clear vision. There's very few movies left in Hollywood where you just give a director a bunch of money and say, here, we believe in you, go do this thing. Instead, you get all this studio interference and people wanting to add their own ideas, which is generally great, but you got to have a singular vision to really guide and steer this giant ship, because you're going to have all these people putting in their input and their 2 cents and really diluting your vision. And it's just with the nature of how much movies cost to make, that's just the nature of the beast. There's a with HBO and other kind of like Netflix, there are some instances of very pure, unadulterated creator stuff. Like, and you'll also see in like YouTube, where you aren't beholden to outside influences, and you're not beholden to, like, say, ad revenue or whatever, and you can just do your vision, and and as a result, you'll get really strong stuff. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. I'm sure, Pat, you got some ideas.
Oh yeah, and excuse me. One thing I really wanted to talk about is, to get conspiratorial, in Anatomy of the State, Rothbard talks about the opinion molders of society. And one of the opinion molders, obviously, is the academic class. That's one that we can identify. And then there's the media. And one of the branches of the media is Hollywood. And I just sent Daniel some links on Facebook here, I don't know if you got them, about linking to a Corbett Report episode where he talks about the CIA's influence in Hollywood and how the CIA checks off on the scripts and that kind of stuff. And is what we're seeing here, is it more guided, do you think, by the nature of the beast, the nature of the industry, or is it more guided by, do you think, government actors and the opinion molders?
I definitely think there's some of that. And yeah, having it be a censor, but it ultimately, in a free market, you're trying to serve your customers, and you're trying to give. I mean, you're making this movie hoping that your audience responds to it, and that, you're connecting with your audience and they really enjoy what you're doing. But I would put the CIA influence, and I have heard that before, and I'm not an expert on that, but it sounds like, are you kidding me? They're massive opinion pushers in Hollywood, and it would make complete sense for the CIA and the United States government to have some sort of interest in molding that opinion. So I can see them doing that, and I have heard that before. But I would say that's just another set of interference and like another hurdle for your script to get through. Just more interference. Like, is it the CIA? Is it more the studio that's interfering with your movie? Is it budget constraints? Is it product placement? Is it your producers not doing a good job? I mean, all these things contribute to the shoddy product you see on screen. And who's to say? I mean, there's so many moving parts in a movie these days. There's lots of things you could point to.
Well, and see, do you see the solution? Because one thing I have identified is that there are good movies coming out. They're few, this is my taste, in my opinion. They're few and far in between, but in my opinion, they're coming from the indie studios or more independent producers like that. I mean, so A24 Studios has made a few movies that I was really into, like The Witch. I don't know if you guys have seen that one. I was really big into that. Let's see. There was this movie called...
I've heard good things.
Yeah, it's great. Or this movie called Moon. Have you seen that one?
Oh, that's a great movie. Yeah,
yep.
Sure.
And
that's the same guy who did Gravity, I believe.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he went on to do lots of good stuff. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm kind of... Have you seen The Lobster?
Yeah, I recently saw The Lobster.
Yeah,
I didn't get to see the whole movie, but yeah. Yeah, that's a very unique... Those kind of, indie unique movies. I mean, those are things I think you have less studio interference when the budget's smaller, and you got people that more believe in vision and telling a good story when you don't have so many different, influences coming in from 20 different places.
Or Ex Machina, or Ex Machina, however you pronounce it. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, we did an episode on that.
Oh, no way. How have I missed
did.
that? Was it like episode 5 or something?
It was early on. Daniel, do you remember that one?
It was our New Year's special. It was with Liam from the Tom Woods group, and it was under the Reed Rothbard banner, and it was
that's it.
Called Can You Rape a Robot?
Yeah.
And it's, I think, banned or demonetized on YouTube right now because of that.
There you go. There's like they did some weird. There were some SJW undertones and some weird stuff with gender in that movie and like rape culture and stuff. But I mean, genuinely, I think it was a great film. I really enjoyed it. I'm not a connoisseur. Like, film isn't my thing. But yeah.
But you like what you like.
Yeah, I do, and I like really heady movies like that. Like, what was the space one? The the biggest space one that came out recently with
Interstellar?
Yeah, Interstellar. That was the one I really liked.
We did that one too.
Yeah,
did you?
That one. Yep.
How I'm supposed I mean we start this episode by saying you guys are like my left wing, like you're like the second edge.
Wait. We're the left wing? What?
I don't know. Right hand.
Phrasing, please.
Damn. I knew that I was going to make that analogy, and I knew that you were going to call me out for it, actually.
Sorry to fall and be so predictable.
Yeah, I don't know. But do you see one thing that I tweeted? So when the whole Harvey Weinstein thing was coming out, which I wasn't surprised about at all, I think that pedophilia is something that is, to get a little Alex Jonesy, but I think political pedophilia is a thing, and that child sex trafficking is a major industry among the elites. And to have the whole Harvey Weinstein thing come out, I don't think there's pedophilia involved, but to hear more about the dark underside to Hollywood and how child stars are being trafficked around, I'm hoping that this destroys Hollywood. Personally, that's my hope, and I'm hoping that from the ashes will emerge a new order, so to speak, of actual art, of actual people who are making real films that are deep and say something philosophical. Do you guys see that coming from the indie movie sphere? Do you see that happening at all? What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
Well, I go back and forth on this sort of thing. What makes a good movie? For me, I need to, connect with it. I really need to be entranced. I got to love the story, blah, blah, blah. But clearly I am in the minority. I mean, maybe everybody says that, but I doubt it. It seems to be like the movies that make the most money are the broad ones that people can just go and watch, and it was a fun popcorn movie, and I didn't really have to pay attention. I turned my brain off and whatever. I talk to Daniel all the time about, what is the best movie? Is it like Citizen Kane, or is it like Transformers 4? Transformers 4 made a whole lot more money. It clearly satisfied way more of a market than Citizen Kane did. So I've had this opinion. I've had this argument with Atlas Shrugged. Atlas Shrugged, I don't know if you'd really say it's like the best novel with like the best well-written novel and really compelling characters and stuff like that. But it's one of the best-selling novels of all time. And if you're going to judge something by what the market says, which I like to do, I'm a huge fan of the market. But the market also, consumes, Justin Bieber on a massive scale, and pop music on a massive scale, and Transformers on a massive scale. So what I judge to be good is clearly not what everybody judges to be good. It seems to be pay off better to play to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, there's no accounting for taste. Though I would add to your commentary that the cost of making a movie is so grossly overinflated that they almost have to, they can't cater to all segments of the market. There can't really be different strokes for different folks as much as there would be in an unfettered free market. You have a very strong union presence. You have union scales being paid to everyone involved in making a film. You have huge liabilities that go along with making film, and you have all sorts of government intervention. We were just talking about the CIA, but there's also film bureaus in various places where films get made. So there's a whole lot of impediment to what would really happen in a free market in creating film where you could focus making something that is truly worthy of the craft. That I don't know. It just feels like it would be a little bit different if it was a bit freer, But I also see the other side of that sword in that you get into this. What's Jordan Peterson describe it as? Postmodernism. Like you start seeing some of this avant-garde stuff that is really just trying to deconstruct Western society and things of that nature. And I don't know if you get more or less of that in a freer market. But I thought we should bring up that aspect because there is an influence of that. But also, I think we should also discuss McCarthyism, because that was a big deal related to Hollywood back in the 40s, the 50s, the HUAC and the House Un-American Activities Committee, and it was all about targeting Hollywood and socialists, communists, using that as a platform to propagate their ideology into the mainstream, which, in my opinion, kind of continues to this day. One example, and Robert, I sent you a meme related to this earlier today, but Will and Grace came out in the mid-'90s, and it was all about getting gay people more accepted, so achieving tolerance for homosexuality, which I'm fine with that. Seinfeld did the same thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, that whole thing. But now it's evolved to where now it's not only tolerance, but it's equality. And it's forced equality at the barrel of a gun. And it's even gone beyond that to a step to where now it's whatever pronoun I deem you need to tell me I am, or that I tell you you need to refer to me as in this particular moment, and there's like 50 of them, and if you don't do the right one, and this is the law in Canada, I think, you could be arrested for it. So it's this sliding scale of moving the culture forward to get something accepted and then start promoting positive rights and legal, actions and laws that are immoral, and in no way are they immoral because of its, homosexuality. They're immoral because there's no victim, there's no crime, right? These are calling someone he or she because they appear to be a man or a woman, and they take offense to that, and because they identify as a pink unicorn, is not a crime.
There's no property issue.
How dare you, sir?
Do you guys have any thoughts on the Harvey Weinstein issue or what we've said about indie films?
I do have one comment, and that is related to Robert's point that was about the inclusiveness and the United Colors of Benetton being different actors and whatnot. And I feel like that there's a contradiction at play from the SJW types, and that is the concept of if you do the United Colors of Benetton thing, not only does it become bland, but then it's also about, well, who got left out? And then it's also about, well, this person's just there because they're the token whatever. So you can't win in either scenario with these people, and I think that boils down to the critical theory concept, which is just disparage anything that is the predominant culture, claim it as oppression, attempt to destroy it, and use the chaos that ensues to inject your ideas of communism and socialism.
Is it also about divide and conquer? Because that's my fixation, is the divide and conquer narrative. And
yeah, it's absolutely what it is. Yeah, it is divide and conquer, and that's the whole political game. If you really boil it down, that's what politics is. It's breaking people into two or more groups that oppose each other, and you see this every election cycle. Oh, this is the most important election in history. Oh, the other side is the most evil thing ever. Literally Hitler. Literally the worst. And it happens every time, without fail. And then the election gets over, and one side's like, well, that's our guy. And the other side's like, I hate him, but I'm not going to really do anything about it. Maybe I'll have a pussy hat march, but that's about it. Trump sort of elicits a bit more reaction than I think has been...
Some other standard politician, yeah.
Yeah, seen in the past generation or so. GWB elicited some anti-war type stuff, which I think was a positive thing, but they disappeared as soon as Obama took the helm and did the same thing. So it's not the issue, it's the individual figurehead.
It's absolutely hypocritical because, they'll say, well, this movie needs to have more Asian people in it. Well, you could just take that to the extreme. Well, how come it doesn't have any Asian disabled people in it, or Asian disabled people with AIDS in it? It's ridiculous and stupid.
Right, and at what point is it, token, and then at what point is it appropriation?
Right.
And pandering, Or
yeah, right.
In the 70s there were blaxploitation films, and that was like a big negative. That was a slur against those films, like Shaft.
Mm-hmm. Would they be seen as blaxploitation, or would they be seen as inclusiveness today? Who knows? Probably both at the same time.
One thing that you were mentioning earlier, Robert, about taking risks. One thing that I thought of is that we know what high budget films look like. You think of your blockbusters like who was in that South Park episode? Someone was raising the bar. The biggest, all the biggest directors, they have the big flash, the camera flares, or that kind of stuff.
Oh, J.J. Abrams.
J.J. Abrams or
Michael Bay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Michael Bay or
Zack Snyder, who we're going to talk about later. He's got a very visceral, kinetic look to his action scenes.
Can you achieve high quality, professional looking films on a low budget? And are indie films kind of the answer, because you're looking at a bunch of nobodies who are willing to risk everything? They're willing. Is that the right kind of lens to look at this through?
It can absolutely be done. If you look at the movies of Robert Rodriguez, he doesn't really do a lot of movies these days, but if you look at his stuff that he did in the 90s with Desperado and El Mariachi and a couple other of his movies, he was doing those movies on the shoestringiest of budgets. I think El Mariachi was made for $500, and Desperado was made for like $2 million or something like that.
Wow.
And these are, comparable to Hollywood blockbusters at the time, or not necessarily blockbusters, but like action films of the time. And he just did it with a lot of planning and cutting a lot of corners and doing a lot of it himself and just really meticulously planning it out. And I think he was able to stretch his dollar really well, and he's made a nice career for himself, being able to put a lot on the screen for every dollar that he gets. And some directors are better at that than others. There's a certain amount of Hollywood likes to take a movie or a director that makes one successful indie movie for like $5 million, and then they give them like $130 million and be like, here, make a blockbuster. Two different processes of making this movie that you want to make with, probably a crew, a bunch of people that you like and you probably grew up with, and who knows. And then you're thrown into this big budget, massive Hollywood machine movie where you're supposed to be the guy with all the answers. And you're like, what do I do? Hello? Anyone? It's killed a bunch of guys like Josh Trank and others. Josh Trank made a movie, I forget what it was called, but it was about basically a Fantastic Four movie with a bunch of kids with superpowers. And then he was given the Fantastic Four movie, and that blew up in his face. But yeah, Hollywood likes to do that, and I'm not really sure why. I think they're looking for that indie heart and that indie authenticity. But then they just throw them to the wolves as if they're going to succeed. I don't understand that. It's really weird. I understand from the director standpoint. If they offered me tomorrow, hey, do you want to direct the next Avengers movie? I would absolutely say yes. Yeah. I wouldn't know what to do. I would fail miserably. I'd probably lean on everybody else that knows how to make a movie. But I would want to do it.
Well, and we were talking before about, what was it? Okay, so the market demand. And I think you make a real good point about the market demand. Like, this is what people want to see, right? Although I will say, I think I've heard a lot of statistics about how movies aren't grossing much in the last year, and that people aren't really turning out and aren't really interested in films more recently. And I don't know whether that's to do with the economy or whether it's to do with Hollywood just being completely out of touch with the rest of the country. And I want to talk about that too, but let's put that on the back burner. But let me propose a different type of currency for films. And this maybe doesn't satisfy from a free market perspective, but meaningful discussion. So meaningful discussion and the staying power of films. One thing I did learn in undergrad was talking about the test of time. Does that have any sway, do you think? Could that successfully show the success of a film or something like that? Does meaningful conversation, is that any sway? Is that a good judge of the success of a film besides from box office
Oh, if it generates a whole lot of contemplation and meaningful idea, thinking about it and stuff like that.
Yeah, and staying power.
Yeah, I mean, movies will develop, a cult following, absolutely, if they fail initially in their initial theater runs. But there have been we do all kinds of cult classics on Actual Anarchy that have developed cult followings after the time, and they've gone on to
abysmal box office.
Yeah, that have gone on to develop followings and make plenty of money on it in the end of the day. But if you have more of a cultural impact, I think it's nice for sure. I think people would rather have the dollars, but I would love it if there was a strong libertarian movie that had a really strong cultural impact, and even if it didn't do well financially, man, I'd be super happy.
Yeah, that'd be great. I keep hoping for Matt Stone and Trey Parker, but they just seem more like mainstream left libertarians, even though they hate conservatives and liberals. But
they have some good commentary sometimes, for sure, and they definitely seem a little bit libertarian, but at the same time, they're equally happy to just skewer everybody, saying that everybody's dumb, which is kind of their job and MO. I can't really fault them for it, but
it's kind of true.
I hope they're growing the culture, so to speak, or trying to affect the culture in that way. But let's close though with because I know we're running a little short on time here, but let's close with that question: like, is Hollywood out of touch with the rest of the country, or do they actually represent? Are they out of touch with the whole country, or do they represent the coastal elites, so to speak, or what do you guys think about that whole conversation?
Well, I think that they just care less and less. I think they're understanding that their market is more of a global market, and that they're pandering more towards India and China and other places. I mean, the United States and places like it are facing really stiff competition from alternative entertainment sources like Netflix and HBO. And the internet and YouTube and everything else in between. So you're going to see
and the Liberty Weekly podcast
and the Actual Anarchy and Liberty Weekly podcast. So I think they're having to, as a necessity, go to consider other revenue streams, just like everybody else does. When you're facing competition, you got to appeal to different markets, and so they're marketing. They're not even I don't know if you watched one of the recent Transformers movie. I think it wasn't the last one, but the one before that. If you watch that Transformers movie, they're obscenely pandering to the Chinese market. If you watch that movie, there are, I want to say, like 4 or 5 Chinese pop stars in the movie. And there's a scene where, I forget who it is. I can't remember his name, but he's one of the main characters in the movie. And there's this really awkward scene where he just steps aside and he's like, man, I'm going to enjoy some of this Chinese milk. And he just drinks it like it was a commercial. It's hilarious. I think it's just a fact of competition. Maybe Hollywood just realizes that they can't compete with Netflix and HBO and all that kind of stuff, and they're just going to get the dollars where they can get them.
What do you think, Daniel? That's an interesting take.
Well, I think Robert makes very good points, but I also think that there's a brewing backlash to Hollywood as a result of the Weinstein revelations, and so it'll be really interesting to see what happens, because it sounded like, in regards to your question, you're talking about like the most recent, year or two, where a whole lot of attention hasn't been paid to a lot of movies that have been coming out. But I mean, there have been several Star Wars movies. The Wolverine movie came out, was really big. The Logan. I don't want to say that there hasn't been some blockbuster type movies out there. Are you speaking more just in general, like the overall trend is sort of down?
But I mean overall a little bit. And Peter Schiff has talked about how in some of his recent podcasts how people aren't seeing movies and how it's just contrived superhero movies. And we won't get into this. Maybe we'll get into this on your Man of Steel show. I think that, Hollywood has just become one mass appeal, blockbuster, large budget film after another. And from my personal taste, I am not interested at all. And I don't really see much like profound stuff coming out. You know what I mean? So, and not that blockbusters ever were really profound, but if you get down to, like, I don't know, something like The Shining, there's so much there, and I just don't feel like we're seeing that in the mainstream anymore.
That's probably true. I mean, you don't have a Kubrick out there these days.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Nolan, who plays with time shifts and whatnot and tries to bring some interest, but I don't know who's doing anything like super interesting today. I mean, we've already sort of touched on, like, the things that really stand out now are, oh, there's a bunch of lens flare. Oh, that's J.J. Abrams. Oh, there's a bunch of Greek mythology and some Matrix-style CGI action sequence. Well, that's Zack Snyder. You know, I mean, that's not super profound or anything. It's sort of visual eye candy type thing, which I guess does have a certain appeal. Like, it's pretty, it's fun to watch, fun to look at, and maybe that is all that's needed to go after that global audience. You know, I mean, if something doesn't have a culture-specific story to it, it sort of broadens the appeal, right? It sort of makes it approachable by more and more consumers, and I think it maybe loses some of its personality in the process.
Yeah.
Let me just go on a real brief rant against CGI. I am a fan, for the most part, of things when they look pretty, and it's gotten a lot cheaper and directors are really starting to rely on it too much. But you'll watch even like a movie like Man of Steel that we're about to record, and other movies of the ilk, like in Transformers or Star Wars or anything, and it's really noticeable. Not that it doesn't look pretty. It looks great. And CGI artists, you're getting fantastic. All hands to you. But you'll notice when the actor, since he's looking like at a tennis ball or a ping pong ball or whatever, you know, he's really looking at, he's supposed to react to, and then the director's telling him in his ear, hey, you're looking at a monster or whatever. He's doing the best he can to react to it. But he's not reacting like he really sees that thing. And you'll see it in the movies all the time. When there's a big effect shot, especially in like Man of Steel, Superman's looking at, you know, a blank green screen. But on screen you see some massive explosion and things happening and whatever, and you just see this stoic Superman face. And he's just like, yeah, seen it all before, who cares? And so then as the audience, you're like, seen it all before, who cares? I mean, the character doesn't seem to care. He's not really super interested. He's not blown away by what he's saying. And it happens a lot in movies where, yeah, they're going for the pretty, and apparently that sells to, like you said, and like we've mentioned, you know, international audiences and things. You can just look at things for their visual appeal. But it really does kind of take me out of the movie and out of the story and kind of remove me, like, well, the character doesn't seem to be super worried about this thing on screen because he can't see it. And he's supposed to be trying to react to it, but he can't. He's doing his best, but he's an actor looking at a green screen. What can he do? So that just, it takes me out of the movie, and it kind of leads to this degrading quality in movies that I think you're picking up on, in my opinion. So I am all for more practical effects, or at least some sort of mix where you're getting more practical. So just give the actors more to react to and make you feel like you're really invested into the story and what's happening, because the characters, if they're not reacting and they don't care what's happening on screen, then the audience isn't going to care what's happening on screen. Yeah,
I mean, without really knowing much about film myself, it's easy to sit here and criticize, but I don't really know much about it. And then I speak from a point of disdain for the popular culture, too, in almost a hipster-like fashion, but I'm not doing it ironically. But, yeah, I mean, and I had the same question for Doc Brown. He did It with you guys, that film. But I asked him, because he works at a library, what are the foundational literary works that are coming out recently? Like the Insta classics. I can't see any. Who is a profound literary talent who is writing novels right now? I mean, I can't name one. I know Harper Lee just released a book, but I don't think it got really all the acclaim that To Kill a Mockingbird did. So I'm sure there are maybe some, but none that come to mind. Maybe we won't know it but for the test of time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So to close up, we've been doing the Patreon bonuses here. Our Patreon subscribers can get access to this footage, but they can also get access to the complete unedited audio of all of the conversations that we're having tonight at patreon.com/libertyweekly. Forgot to mention beforehand that the show notes for this page can be found at libertyweekly.net/37. Well, Robert and Daniel, why don't you give one last plug for the Actual Anarchy podcast? I know that my audience has heard a whole lot about you, so
Listen
go
to
for it, though.
Listen to it. It's a lot of fun. I do it every week with my buddy Daniel. We talk about movies from anarcho-capitalist rough, dirty, and expected. Lately, we've been getting more into the minutia of story and filmmaking craft and kind of analyzing things from that aspect. But when there are applicable elements that we can talk about, economics or morality, we do bring those up. So we do recommend the podcast for the libertarian anarcho-capitalist types. But we also try to appeal to more of a broad audience. We're trying to change the culture, Pat.
The culture.
Culture's
yeah,
super
that's
important.
right.
Yeah.
And you can find it at actualanarchy.com, also wherever podcasts are sold, even though ours is free. But do subscribe, like, share, comment, do whatever. Give us a little bit of incentive to keep going. But it is a lot of fun. Robert and I have, like I said earlier, we were having these conversations anyway, and we just decided to start recording them because the NSA was already doing it. But now we throw it out there, out for the world to see. So here we are.
Naturally. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll do it again soon. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us, listeners, and we'll see you next time. All right. Pretty good.
All right. Good episode, guys. I got to take a potty break. You're back.
Yeah. So almost 59 minutes there, bud.
Oh.